What kind of face is the prototype hiding behind his mask? Or is this just his actual face? Knowing about the prototype's compulsion to update himself, it's unclear what parts of him were original and what were added later. And where did his mask even come from? You'd think something known for repurposing toy parts would have a face reminiscent of something in the factory, but that's not the case here. Well, I think I have a good place to start, and it may have the easiest answer out of all the questions we have. Is the prototype's mask just a modified Poppy mask? The two masks may look different, but that could have been an intentional move by the prototype. In a Chapter 5 trailer, we're shown a bunch of Poppy masks within the labs, where the prototype seems to have been spending most of his time since the Hour of Joy. This could have been hinting at the prototype having created a modified Poppy mask for himself while working in the labs. The prototype's conflicting feelings about Poppy also supports this theory. Wearing a modified Poppy mask could make the prototype feel connected to Poppy in a way, while still being his own person with his individualized mask. But conflicting with that theory is the fact that the prototype came before Poppy. The prototype's mask is incredibly simple at first glance, having big eye holes and an unmoving mouth with exposed teeth. That's it. Poppy's porcelain mask is much more detailed than the prototype's, including blinking eyes, a moving mouth, and even ears, all making her look more human-like. Though, to be fair, the prototype might have some little ears tucked underneath his gesture hat, but he's still looking like Patrick Star missing a nose. Sure, the Poppy dolls existed at the time the prototype was created, but I doubt that Elliot would have wanted to use a mask inspired by his daughter on a test run. So that would imply that the prototype had an original face, then put on some sort of modified mask at some point. That may also imply that Poppy or other toys in the factory would know his true identity, but that's never alluded to. But doesn't that sound exactly like something he'd do, modifying the face or whatever appearance he initially had to spite who created him? We still don't know much about the time between Poppy's creation and Elliot's death, or how much Poppy even interacted with the prototype before they were found with Elliot's body. The singular interaction we hear between Elliot and the prototype proves that their relationship was shaky from the start, and that bringing Poppy back might have caused an even bigger rift between them. If it isn't a modified mask of Poppy, then at the very least the prototype must have collected some parts that resulted in this current look. I really doubt that the scientists had him looking like this. So what could actually be behind the prototype's mask? One theory I have is that the prototype has a fleshy face, which wouldn't be the first time we've seen this. Wouldn't it make sense for the prototype to have something similar to what we see with Poppy? After Chapter 2's train crash, Poppy only had a crack on her cheek, not actually showing any of her inner workings. But the prototype's damage to Poppy exposed a fresh face beneath her porcelain that looks almost like muscle tissue. With Elliot Ludwig being responsible for both creations, it would be weird if their structures were completely different. With the prototype being the last experiment before Ludwig successfully brought back Poppy, would the flesh underlayer be something in both experiments? We can see muscular structures hanging among the prototype's more mechanical parts, so it doesn't seem out of the question for there to be a face of muscles behind his mask as well. While Poppy's mask is more detailed than the prototype's, his mask isn't completely different from hers. With Elliot's experiments being the only ones with porcelain included in their structures, he certainly could have made both Poppy and the prototype's faces that we see currently. I'd even surmise that Ludwig had just put more energy into his final product, aka Poppy. Or was this flesh face an advancement? Every experiment that Ludwig did would have provided him with some answers and ways to improve his next experiment, including experiment 1006. The prototype's teeth have gums, so that's a step in the right direction at least. Maybe the experiment before him had a face full of bones, less like a human child and more like a skeleton. But the flesh face may have been something that Elliot thought of including after the prototype's creation. Perhaps discovering this made Poppy better in some way. The prototype's original face might have looked so different than Poppy's that Elliot ended up adding this mask after the fact to make them more alike. Whether Elliot or the prototype added this mask that we see, their reasons for doing so might connect to my next theory on what's behind the mask. What if beneath it, the prototype has an exoskeleton similar to the Five Nights at Freddy's animatronics? An exoskeleton objectively makes a lot of sense here. We've known even from the very first chapter that the prototype was built different from the other toys. In the final log tape, we get a fuzzy glimpse of his claw, though we've now seen the full form of the prototype, jester hat and all. Well, everything except what's behind that mask of his. While much of the prototype's lower half is mechanical and metal, that really seems to be his much more homemade half, rather than part of his original constructions. Still, a few things we know support the prototype having an exoskeleton beneath the surface of all his add-ons, including what's within the other experiments' bodies. Poppy has two big blue human-like eyes. Well, she used to have two. While the prototype's mask only shows the glow of a singular yellow light in his eye socket. Perhaps the prototype's yellow eye is tied into some mechanical underlayer that's allowing him to function so efficiently. He's clearly stronger than the average human and incredibly intelligent, even disassembling a digital alarm clock to make a laser pointer during his confinement by playtime. I'm not so sure just any human adult could figure out how to do this without instruction, let alone someone with the mind of a traumatized child. Perhaps this extreme delay of intelligence that we continue to see moving forward comes from the prototype being more like a robot than a human on the inside. While the other talking experiments have voice boxes inside of their bodies allowing them to speak, the prototype's voice box seems to work differently. Elliot's conversation with the prototype shortly after he was created showed where Ollie's voice came from, but it also lacked the usual voice switching we hear the prototype do in every other conversation he has. His voice box might be connected to a more complex inner mechanical system that allows him to change his voice as he pleases, as he also uses Ollie's voice consistently when talking over the walkie-talkie. Though it's possible the prototype can only use Ollie's voice long term, since it was his organic material used to create his experiment. But he's even able to seemingly study or just straight up copy other people's voices, which we don't hear the other experiments doing. Maybe behind his mask is just a voice box and an advanced tape recorder playing back words he's heard other people say. Who knows? Not to mention, the prototype can also spin his face, which we especially see in the Wrong Side Out music video. So perhaps the prototype's mask just looks simpler than Poppy's due to serving a more functional purpose, like easily popping off for mechanical fixes or interior machine upgrades even. From his exterior, the prototype certainly looks quite mechanical, so maybe his insides match the outside after all. Or could there be something or someone completely different behind the prototype's mask? My last theory is probably the most likely, and I'm sure you'll agree with this too. What if hiding behind the prototype's mask is the one and only Limon? Did I hear me out? His name is Limon. He has a family. You know who wants a family? The prototype. Stay with me, stay with me. All right, I'm done. But in all seriousness, or at least some seriousness, we could end up seeing Limon behind the mask of the prototype or someone like. Limon was a part of a oh, you thought I was joking. Of a series of genetically modified fruits that someone had been leaving around the factory, with no one fessing up about who was doing it. Limon. The note that tells us about Limon was written in 1993. Yes, we're still going with this. With the prototype having escaped Playtime's containment sometime before the Hour of Joy in 1995. Without knowing exactly when he escapes, the prototype could have already done so by the time this note was written. All that to say, was the prototype the one placing Limon around the factory to mess with the scientists? And additionally, maybe he even popped a little Limon of his own under his mask, even just to have a friend. Now, is that too crazy? Back on a more serious note, knowing that there might be more Limons or his family members out there, combined with the fact that Playtime Co. was doing experiments with other plant life in the poppy gel, is it possible that Playtime conducted some of these experiments on the prototype? Sawyer was conducting all sorts of experiments on the prototype, with him asking Sawyer,
"This question referred to what exactly?"
"You stick us,
"Beat us."
tear at flesh."
"Do you feel it?"
With the scientists having some success with the growth medium in plant life, perhaps they did some experiments on the prototype with poppy gel and plant life as well, which then makes me wonder if they conducted these experiments in the first place, because Playtime was trying to replicate Elliot Ludwig's experiments. Maybe Elliot used plant matter in the prototype's creation, which will end up being visible behind his mask down the line. Or Playtime's experiments on the prototype included lemons as their specific form of plant life, possibly leading us to see Limon behind the prototype's mask, as crazy as that might sound. And folks, remember, the prototype's eye is yellow. But this is the nail in the coffin. Reuniting Limon with his family of lemons in chapter 5 even results in the Wrong Side Out song playing. Maybe he's just a CG5 fan, or maybe Limon has a connection to the prototype that we just won't fully understand until we see behind that mask. Whether the prototype's mask is his original face or an addition added later, it's hiding secrets that even the prototype doesn't fully know. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.